And of course, that's our Alma Hut offering that we're collecting this month. And Lord, so lead you, please give. Speaking of offering, we forgot to do that today. And we certainly want to pay the light bill. And thank you, it's still working. So if I can, we're doing some housekeeping things, trying to get this order of service down. If I can pick on Damon and Jessica, not right now, but at the end of our service, if you're ready, thank you. Maybe if Jessica, you can maybe get a plate and be up here, and Damon in the back. And if you're not going to give your offering in Sunday school, but you brought one for here, just drop one in the plate to them, and we'll get it in the back there. Well, in time for the Lord's Word, and we are going through the Sermon on the Mount this fall, seeing what Jesus says is His way of living. Not our way, not our culture's way, not your friend's way, not what anybody else say, but what's Jesus' way, and do you want to follow that way of living for a better life? So this morning, let me start by making a statement, and maybe in your mind, you can agree or disagree. The statement is, and you have some sermon notes there if you need them. If not, you can just listen. We are living in angry times. We are living in angry times. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I've just been thinking about some things that I've been seeing, that I've been hearing, that I've been experiencing. I've seen on the news nooses hung on churches. I'm seeing symbols of hate plastered on synagogues. I'm seeing cities like Charlottesville being in upheaval. There seems to be anger everywhere we look. There's anger amidst sports fans, of all things. There is anger between political parties that we see very evident. There is anger I've seen and experienced between friends. There's anger in the midst of families many times. I've experienced in my own family sisters that wouldn't speak to each other for years because of anger. Every now and then we'll see signs or see a blip about parents being outraged and out of control at their children's sporting events. There is road rage. Have you ever experienced road rage? I hope you haven't participated in that. There are Christians that sling insults at one another. You wouldn't imagine it. There are people in churches that get angry at something or another, and even get angry at one another. Our anger is out of control, isn't it? Our anger is out of control. And then many times, someone will get very angry, or they'll just fly off the handle and say something, or wound somebody, or cause a situation to be just terrible, more terrible than it really is. And then you'll hear them justify it, and sometimes they'll say, yeah, I got angry, but at least I didn't kill anybody. Yeah. We said that last week Jesus teaches that we should be guided by principles and values in life. And that He is saying, if you're my follower, if you're a Jesus follower, you need to be guided by my principles and my values in life. And in that setting, He delivers the greatest teaching of all time, the Sermon on the Mount. And in this sermon, He is saying, if you look up into verse 20 of verse 5, He says, the framework I'm putting this in is that your life, your morals, your principles, your values have got to be greater than the scribes and the Pharisees, the great religious leaders of your day. I don't even want you to follow your great religious pastors and leaders. I want you to go beyond that. I want you to follow what I am going to say. And so I think it's important that this morning one of the first things we'll look at is what does Jesus say about anger? And what does Jesus and how does he say to respond to it? What is the Jesus way when thinking about anger? And I think if Jesus was coming here right now for the first time, this is when God decided to send him, and he did a Sermon on the Mount. Do you think anger would be one of his topics still today? You bet. So in your Bibles, the 5th chapter of Matthew, in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm again reading with the 21st verse. Jesus says this, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder.' And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." This is the word of the Lord. Well, I think the Jesus way about anger, in this passage we just read, Jesus gives us several principles that we need to remember when dealing with our own anger. Now, as we go through this, I want to bring it personal at the beginning rather than the end. Maybe you're here, like the song says, not like the song says, you don't have to jump up and testify, but maybe you're angry with somebody today. Or maybe you're angry at something. Maybe you're harboring anger for some reason. As we go through what Jesus says today, think about how you're dealing with that anger, okay? Make it personal. The first thing Jesus, I think, says about anger is that our words can be deadly when spoken in anger. Our words can be deadly when spoken in anger. And in that 22nd verse, Jesus refers to 3 different ways that our anger can be expressed through our words that are not His ways and that can do damage to ourselves, to others, and to the relationships we're in. He says, "I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." The first type of anger that Jesus is talking about, it's the anger that goes beyond just being initially reactive to something. You know, we all get angry at something, don't we? I mean, something always can flare our temper, can it? You know, that's human nature, and God, gave us that emotion. Sometimes it's for good things. Jesus got angry that poor people were being taken advantage of in the temple, and He overturned the tables, didn't He? Moses got angry that the people were worshiping another god when he came down with God's laws, and he got angry, didn't he? There are times when anger is appropriate, but this first type of anger that Jesus refers to, it's the kind that goes beyond a justified anger. It's a kind that goes beyond just that match anger that flares up quickly, then goes away. Jesus is talking about the anger that we just can't let go of. Have you ever had that kind of anger? It's the anger we just can't let go of. It's the resentment that we can nurse within us for a long time. It's the anger that we brood over and won't let die. That we can fan the flames, and for some reason it feels good the more angry we get because we think we're justified in being angry about that person or about that situation. It's the kind of anger that can wound another and even kill ourselves. And we've got to, Jesus says, be protective about letting anger just build up and get the best of us and make us worse persons than we really are, and that Jesus wants us to be. The second type of anger in that one verse, Jesus talks about not only that anger that builds up, but he talks and deals with the tone of voice that we can use when we're really angry. And that's really what that word raka is all about. It really, in Jesus' day, the people would know this is how you sound when you're really angry. This is the tone of voice that you're using when you're talking to another person. When you're really spewing out your anger at somebody with the intention of really letting them know you're angry and really sometimes wanting to wound them with your words. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You're really trying to hit a target with this type of anger. It's being so angry with someone that your words to them or talking about them to another person cut them. They hurt them. They bring pain to them. It can grow into words that are cruel and spiteful and mean-spirited. Have you ever got that angry? Have you ever regretted something that you said? It's maliciously saying to somebody or about somebody, I hate you, with a hiss in your voice. Or it's saying, you'll never amount to anything because you're so infuriated. Or you are just good for nothing. This kind of anger, as it builds, it's prejudiced at its worst, isn't it? It's prejudiced, it's hate at its worst. Jesus says about that, we can't do that. You're answerable to the court. And then he says, thirdly, anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. And that's the third level of anger in this first point, is that the third kind of anger is the anger that you spew out. You say hate with a hiss in your voice, but what you say literally can take another person's reputation and their name along with what you say. Does that make sense? Yeah, sometimes you just look like the jerk that you are and that I am when I spew anger. But if you spew anger and rumor and false statements in your anger, and you take somebody's reputation down with it, Jesus says to that degree, that's one of the worst kinds of anger that we can say. It comes, for example, when we criticize another person's lifestyle without knowing all the facts. And we just say it anyway. It's when we assume and call someone else a sinner or that they're sinning and we really don't know. This kind of anger most of the time comes out in the form of the word we use called gossip. And gossip is like murder. It's deadly. That's what Jesus is saying. Jesus says that these types of vicious anger are also included when we think about that commandment in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. You know, the Jesus way is it goes deeper. Hey, you haven't murdered anybody, haven't been arrested, not waiting court, good for you. But it means much more than that, doesn't it? So watch what we say. It can be deadly. Second thing Jesus says about anger, he says, remember, before you worship God, make sure you've reconciled with those you're angry with. Before you come in here and worship the Lord God, be reconciled with those you're angry with. In other words, here Jesus now goes beyond our thoughts, and he even goes beyond us just keeping guard and watch over our tongue and what we say. He says, when it comes to anger, we've also got to be proactive in mending our relationships with others. If we've said something, if we're angry with somebody, or maybe they don't even know we're angry with them, we still have the Jesus obligation to go and mend that with another person. Don't let it just be hidden. Don't let it just be a... have you ever gotten an email in all cap letters? You know, I mean, it's like, I'm going to capitalize all this stuff I'm sending you, and you're really going to know I mean business. That ain't the Jesus way, is it? He's saying, no, you know, we've got to proactively, face to face, love to love, take care of what's bothering us. We, in other words, have to be careful when it comes to worship, and is not to balance evil with the good. And what do I mean by that? Well, we can all slip into this false belief that well, if we attend church regularly, if we come and sing enough praise songs, if we suffer through enough sermons, that will somehow atone for our anger or our unresolved conflict with somebody else. If I do enough good, it'll take care of the bad that I'm neglecting. That's not the way it works, is it? That's not the way it works. You can't outdo sin. You have to repent of sin. You have to go and take care of resolving what you've done wrong to really repent. Jesus here reminds us that true worship, that honest worship, that worship in spirit and truth just cannot take place while we're harboring anger in our hearts. There's just not room for both of them. And we can pretend all we want to. There's the old story of Leonardo da Vinci. And it said that he had just a terrible argument with another man, very angry with him. It was in the midst of him painting The Last Supper, his famous painting. And he had this vicious argument. He went the next day, and he was literally in the part of the painting where he was trying to paint and finish Jesus' face. And he got his brush and his paints out, and he began to, he's probably right-handed, to paint Jesus' face, and he couldn't do it. He had no inspiration. He couldn't vision it. He couldn't decide where the paint strokes could be to finish that part of the painting. And so the story goes, he put down his paintbrush, went immediately to his friend, talked it out, reconciled their differences, obtained forgiveness on both sides, went back the next day and finished the painting of Jesus. You can't look at Jesus' face if you're harboring anger and hate in your heart. That's what he wants us to know. And finally today, don't let your anger fester. Make the first move to resolve conflict. Don't let your anger fester. You need to make the first move. Anger between two people rarely goes away by itself. You thinking you're going to ignore it or not say anything or just cut off completely. I'm so angry, I'm just not going to talk to that person ever again. That anger's not going to go away from within you, is it? In most cases, if you are stressed right now or you're losing sleep over a disagreement that's led to angry words, I guarantee you 95% of the time you're suffering more than the other person is. Many times they're not even thinking about it. Asking someone else to take care of the problem for you, or triangling somebody else in, or to mediate, asking someone to mediate the situation for you, usually doesn't work. The best way, the Jesus way, is to make the first move personally, one-on-one, towards forgiveness and resolve the conflict. Jesus basically saying, don't let it get to the point where it goes to court. Where it goes to the court of public opinion, where it goes to the real court. Take care of it. Take care of it. I remember I was in my mid-20s. That's how vividly I still remember it. I don't remember what the issue was, and that's something else we ought to remember about anger. But I remember I was so angry at a good friend of mine. I went through every levels of this anger. To the point I wasn't talking to this guy. I didn't want to see this guy. I was stewing over it. And I just knew every time I saw him, he knew I was stewing over it. And it was making him feel bad. And it wasn't. But I was mad. I don't even know what it was about. It went on and on and on for several months until in early October, my dad died. He died from cancer after a long battle. And I remember, going to the funeral home, having visitation. My dad was well known, large churches, well known in the community. It was one of those receiving lines that went out the door and winded around. It lasted a long time. And I had it together. I was kind of representing the family there, mom, sisters, and everybody that came through, shaking hands, thank you for being here. Appreciate your support. This guy came through the line. And we never said a word. I started, as the only time I bawled uncontrollably. And we hugged each other and had a long embrace, and we both wept without saying anything. But what we were doing was releasing that anger, weren't we? And releasing that bitterness. Getting that relationship restored. And then after that, I could properly grieve. I could eventually move on. He could move on. That's the Jesus way. That's how he's saying we need to deal with anger. So what is his way when it comes to anger? First, remember that our words can be deadly. Careful what you say. Remember that true worship can't take place to the Lord if you have anger running through your veins. And don't let anger become more and more bitter. Resolve it quickly. Resolve it quickly. We live in angry times. But, boy, Jesus also says the world will best know you're my disciples. How? By your love. If we can deal with anger better in people we relate with, in the church, in our family, outside the church, we will stick out, I hate to say like sore thumbs, we'll stick out like healed thumbs. And we can invite people to worship, and we can share Jesus with them. Because it'll be so much different than all the anger that's flying around. But Jesus has a good word for us today. We're going to pray in just a minute. I'm going to ask our praise team to come back up. They're going to lead us in a closing song. It's also a time of invitation when praise teams quit speaking and long-winded preachers quit preaching. And Jesus can speak to your heart directly. And He's going to speak to you as you sing this song. And I think He's going to speak to you today about anger and about your relationship with Him. If you're thinking about asking Christ in your heart and following Him in baptism, or maybe joining Fairview Church, I just ask that you get with me. I'll be around a little bit after the service before we get ready for the next one. And Willard will be around. Some of our church members ask us how to get to know Jesus, how to take that next step, and maybe to resolve that anger that's in you. Or maybe you just, as a believer, as a church goer, you need to lay some anger aside as we sing this song and leave it here. And then figure out the time that you can call and get with that person you're angry with and take care of it and be relieved. As we sing and Jesus speaks to you, let's stand together.